Hey everyone, welcome. This is the making of special. I'm going to start doing this with some of the little role playing games that I'm going to be incorporating a little bit into the program. And we'll talk about why in just a second that's even happening. But this is the making of special for the RPG one shot that I wrote called HE Double, as in HE double hockey sticks, y'all. Edgy. You may have already heard the episode about that, where it was a recorded play session of a one-shot single sit-down game that was played. That we did a lot of fun. Had a lot of fun with all the people that were able to join. Leslie, Jamie, and London were really good sports, and we had a lot of fun doing it as well. So I'll say right here up top, why did I even do this? There's a lot of podcasts and things out there that do live action role playing and that have been doing it for a long, long time. Role playing games, tabletop role playing games, and sort of role playing adjacent games. Lots of games that are sort of built upon a simplified version of that come in board game features, and that's been exploding for the last couple of years. And I consequently then have gotten more into it. I've always been into board games and have gotten a little bit more into some of those types of gameplay over the years. But one of the ways that I really got into it was that we started to use, me and another therapist started to use Dungeons and Dragons as a something that we did in a social skills group for teens, and most who are have social anxiety. Many have strong ADHD or ADHD type symptoms, or are on the autism spectrum, or basically have basically some kind of either a delay or an interruption in their social interactions, and they've come in. It's been a group that I've been a part of for a long, long time, running that group, and still running strong. So every other week we have them do a role-playing campaign, and we have found that role-playing gameplay is actually a really good way to practice social skills. Now it's broadening out, and you're seeing a lot of therapists and people working in mental health starting to use and to gamify things, as some of my guests who've been on the show have talked about, that utilizing games that already exist or that are created with the primary goal to be functional and fun seems to actually help people to learn and experience emotional things better than if you design it specifically to teach a principle or do those emotional things, because basically if it's fun, you're more likely to do it, is the number one benefit. But so some of the other applications you can do with role-playing games is that you can work through emotional processing. You can get sort of a chance to either directly or indirectly work through experiences and even trauma by doing that. There's also the bonding element. There are many times where trying to establish healthy friendships and attachments, especially if you have gotten out of a toxic relationship or you've had some kind of change in your relationship dynamics that you didn't plan on through life circumstances, or many times with addiction, people try to rebuild a sober kind of a group. And some of these kinds of activities can be a way in the adult world, especially. It's a little hard to just walk up. How do you just walk up and say, be my friend? I don't recommend that. It'd be kind of nice if we were that open, able to do it, but that's something that, trying to find people of like mind and saying, here's an activity that we share. Great. And, if you're a hiker and you can find a hiking group, if you're a bowler, you join a league. But this is something that appeals to a lot of people, and a lot more people are experimenting with it these days. So one of the reasons that I've started, and I started a little while ago, kind of crafting and making some of these kinds of things. Last Christmas, I uploaded a free a little game that I had come up with. That's not the right thing. That I had come up with. There we go. You can go to dwighthurst.com/RPG to see the things I'm talking about. There's a list of some resources there. But anyway, I uploaded to that part of my site a bunch of Santas. It was just a one-shot role play with basically playing as a bunch of Santas from the Santaverse, pulling in together and trying to rescue a Santa or multiple Santas. And then I uploaded around St. Patrick's Day, as you heard in the episode I mentioned, Leprechaun or Leprechaun, which is just basically a game where people play as leprechauns and villagers trying to find or hide a pot of gold. So take that as it is. So those are a couple of things that I've put together. One of the reasons, and if you're not familiar with the kind of terminology, a one-shot RPG is basically one with usually simplified rules and gameplay that allows everyone to sit down and usually within an hour, somewhere within a couple hours at least, being able to say, hey, planned this and we're all going to play it. You can learn the rules and just play it with very, very little or often no preparation beforehand. Now, in this case, when I was planning HE Double, it did require people to come up with people before characters and some attributes of their characters. And we'll get into the play dynamic to know that a little bit more about that. One other thing, if you do, and by the way, these are going to stay up, the Bunch of Santas and the Leprechaun game are both available at dwighthurst.com/RPG as free downloads. They're just gifts for anybody who feels that they could use those or would like to have a good time with them. So I'm always, and then HE Double hockey sticks that we played on there. I'm in the process of writing that up. That will appear on there as well as a free download and will, always be there for till the end of time, or as long as I have a website. One of those will probably end first, time or my website. When you do this, and when you actually get a hold of this, you'll find if you go out and find any kind of an RPG system, there's kind of two different things that you'll find. One is already established, planned out campaigns. Okay. Those have a little bit more of a structure. They have a story. So if you have the DM in D&D, they call that a dungeon master, obviously, or the GM or game master for other systems. The person who's orchestrating it will do some prep where they will plan out a story. Now, the simple one-shot RPGs, oftentimes that I've seen, some have a little more specific control, and then you have the other kind, which are more open. Those are kind of how I'm creating most of the ones I'm doing. Is an open-ended thing where if you get a sheet, so you'll get a sheet that explains the game dynamics and how the game works. If you're not familiar with RPGs, that can throw you off at first because it's like, okay, it tells me what kind of dice you roll and when, but it doesn't tell me what to do if I'm running the game. It doesn't tell me, okay, here's a castle and you go in this castle and there's aliens and the aliens are playing jazz music and yada, yada, yada. No, you have to do that, right? And this is where your creativity comes into play. You have to think of these games as not so much as a game like a board game, but more like a collaborative storytelling experience. So that is something that you get used to as you get more into these things. I'm trying to make this a little bit catch-all for everybody if you've done a lot of this or not done a lot of this. So let me get into how I planned out this game. To do if you're creating this kind of whole thing from scratch is that you have to plan out what kind of game dynamics you're going to have. Now, the game dynamics have to do with what are basically the rules when you come upon something that the players want to do. And when the players want to do something, typically in these kind of games, you can't just say, I do this. There might be some very simple actions where you can say, I look around the corner. And basically you can just probably do that. In most, they would usually call that a free action. If you say, I look around the corner and boy, there's people around there. And it's like, well, what's happening? Am I trying to surreptitiously look around the corner? Then you would have to actually usually roll a dice is usually how this works to determine whether or not you successfully are sneaky or whether you're caught or seen or whatever happens. Okay. And so typically speaking, for any of those kinds of actions that require some kind of either skill or some kind of luck or whatever it is, other than just I read a sign on the wall, something like that, that's very, very simple, then you have to roll a dice in order to determine it. Now, you probably are familiar and everybody's seen like all the millions of dice that you use. There's all kinds of different like 20-sided dice, 10-sided dice, whatever. A lot of one-shots rely upon 6-sided dice because people have them in their home already. Some will use more, D&D uses all the dice in different ways. And so do many different systems that they're developing now have their own dice as well that are unique to that system. So So what you want to do is, you're going to plan out what kind of things do I want to do with rolling dice and how's that going to work and when do people have to do it. Here's what I have approached being, a little bit, not brand new. I guess I've been doing it a little bit now, but being kind of new to the game design thing, when I go to pull from my head and say, what should it be? I like to get lots of inspiration. And I'll show you an example here. This time I ended up looking at a couple different game systems that I liked. Many of them are actually designed to help people design their own games. And one of those is the Rises system. This is one that, as far as I know, it's not necessarily a free download, but you can't. Well, actually, it might be free. Currently, you'd have to check and see. But there's lots of different ways. You can just Google Rises. It's called Rises: The Anything RPG. But one good, really great place to look is drivethrurpg.com. So that's somewhere where you can go to look for, and they often have free or kind of like crowdsource, pay what you want. You can enter a thing, or they have a lot of things that are under $5, under $10, all the way up to you can spend more on systems that are bigger and more established. But you also get artists and creators who are kind of workshopping things that will put something up and ask for feedback. It's a pretty cool little community kind of thing. It's sort of like an Etsy for RPGs and independent things, and it can give you lots of different ideas to read these things. So I will say that this game is not necessarily, it is not a Rises game, but it is a little bit based off of the things that they do there. So, and I'll tell you a little more about that as I get into some of what the dynamics actually are. So the thing that I settled on, see, Rises has to do with what they call personality cliches. There we go. That's what they're called in Rises, which are attributes that you would pick. And I used that dynamic for HE double, but a little bit differently. So in mine, I just called them attributes because that was a little bit easier to explain without going into some of the deeper. Rises is simple, but it's a little more complicated than what I did. So I just called them character attributes. And I asked everybody to tell me, what are your character's attributes going to be? And the example I gave was that, you could say my character has a couple of different roles that my character plays. For example, what if I said I was a Viking, locksmith, birdwatcher? Okay. Well, what would that mean? What that means is it's going to give me certain advantages in the game. And the advantages specifically have to do with how many dice do I roll to gain a success in what I'm doing. Now, HE double is a dice against dice sort of a game. What that means is there's not a certain number you have to hit in order to succeed at a task. But whenever you roll, the GM will also roll, and then you just see who gets the higher number. And if you are successful, you get to do what you wanted to do, and then it rolls out. And you may even be invited by the GM to give a little bit storytelling of like, oh, I tried to throw this thing through this target, right? And I rolled and I succeeded. The GM might say, okay, tell us what it looked like. Was it cool to do a flip, whatever? If you don't make it, then the GM will impose basically something bad is going to happen in some extent. Maybe it just doesn't work, but they also then have the flexibility to say, and not only did you miss, you bounced off and hit you in the face or something like that. And sometimes the consequences can affect how many dice you can roll or whatever. And I think you see that in the gameplay. So that's a little bit how the dice works. As the GM, I planned out a little bit beforehand of here's the different villains or opponents or obstacles. And I gave those each a certain number of dice that they could roll. Easier ones just had like 2 dice that they could roll. So then that gives them a certain range, but you can't really get higher than 12, obviously, with 2 dice, right? Some of them had 3, some had 4, some had 5. I don't think I gave anybody more than that. The maximum that the characters could roll was 4 for a certain skill. Now that gets back to the attributes. So I'm bouncing around a little bit here. Obviously you heard us play it in the thing, so I hope this is making some sense. So back to my example. If I'm a Viking, locksmith, birdwatcher, well, that means a couple things. It means that I have extra skills in anything that has to do with being one of those things. It would also mean that I probably have tools or things that somebody would have. So if I'm a Viking, I could probably make a good case to the GM that I'm walking around with a big axe, maybe. I'm probably quite strong. That's the idea of a Viking, right? If I'm also a locksmith, I probably have maybe some lock tools or lock picking. I could probably even do some basic carpentry.
If I'm a bird watcher, I'm probably pretty observant, maybe even have a good memory. I'm probably carrying binoculars. I definitely know a lot about ornithology, right? If that's the right word. I'm not a bird watcher. And so if I pick those attributes, then the idea would be that in a fun way, whenever I'm confronted with a task or a challenge, if I can find something to do that ties in with one of my attributes, I get to roll more dice. If I just try to do a thing and I don't have any special and it doesn't tie into my attributes, I get to roll one dice. Now, the way that we set this one up, in Rises, by the way, they have 4 cliches basically, but for the sake of ease and making this more simple, I did cut it down to 3 and made it a little bit less complicated. I asked everyone to assign each of their attributes a number of dice. 2 of them get 3 dice, one of them gets 4. So you have one of those that's your primary special talent area. And so I'll give you an example of this is that London, for example, in our gameplay, you noticed he was a character who was a pet rock befriender, a contortionist, and a sun starer adder. So with this kind of system, it's fun to have people have fun, because then he asked me beforehand, is that too silly? And I said, I know there's no such thing. We're trying to have a good time here. And so therefore it was interesting to see how and one of the things about London is he actually is a contortionist in real life. He's also a professional in comedy. And so, he was very much oriented around saying, how can I kind of riff on this and make it a lot of fun? I found this rock. I sort of like befriended it and now it helps me, and sort of a thing. And so with that being his main goal was the pet rock thing. So if he found a way to tie in the use of a rock into whatever he was doing, he got to roll 4 dice, which gives him a much higher potential. You never know for sure, by the way, it's by chance. So you roll 4 dice, you get 4 ones, you get 4, right? You're probably going to lose that roll. So you see how it's a little bit unpredictable, but hopefully a lot of fun as well. So the instructions when you download it will be a little more spelled out than that, but that's a little bit about picking the game dynamics. One of the things then that's also very important is when you sit down to write the story. If you're going to GM this campaign, you already have your game dynamics set up. You get down and you kind of write the story of what's going to happen. I find that it's helpful to take inspiration where you can. I actually, so this game, by the way, so the whole framework, the game dynamic overall is that you go to a barbecue that you've been invited to, and when you get to the barbecue, you are trapped basically in hell. Okay. And one little fun game dynamic, we didn't really mention this in the recording, but you'll see it in the written version when I upload the sheet with instructions, is that the game manager is not allowed to say the word hell. Okay. And you may notice that I didn't do that throughout the whole thing, that I used other things. Boy, it's hot in here. Oh, here's this. It was obviously a hell-like environment, but so the GM's not allowed to do that. And if they do slip up and use the word hell, you get a bonus action where you can actually ask the GM any one question and they have to answer you honestly. So that's a tremendous, I guess, empowering thing in the game. So I thought that would be a little extra fun. That's why I named it HE double, as in HE double hockey sticks, where you're avoiding using the word hell. So this was an idea that I just had the general idea. So once I'd created that umbrella, I started to think about what would you find if you were trapped in hell and had to escape. And so because of that, I started drawing from a lot of different things. Let me take one quick step back. I think that when you are planning something like this, and you can guess which one I gravitate towards, but you want to pick a theme, and it usually has to do with what you're good at and what you enjoy. Are you going to lean on something that's a little bit more comedic? And by the way, you might hear me do that a lot. That's the one I gravitate towards, to have fun, kind of joke around. And everybody I know that I identify most with people who do a little bit of that, who have a little bit of fun with it. You can go on and listen to like different live action play sort of like podcasts and broadcasts. And maybe you're a person who likes to play it a little more straight, a little more serious when you do. And that's fine too. That's the great thing about this kind of collaborative storytelling, is that you can shape it however you would want to. So this is primarily one where we're focused on fun, entertainment, and getting through the story. which, by the way, also some systems, Rises is actually one of those that is a little bit more towards that. And one of the commonalities I kept was there are no what you would usually call hit points. There wasn't really, I guess, direct combat risk in this game. The characters aren't going to die because they don't have any health points. There's no, oh, you're going to die before you get through this. That was not the intention. And so if you're using this in a therapeutic or kind of like a skill building, kind of bonding kind of way, you want to know what your intentions are too. Is this a group that's going to be like, yeah, we're hardcore and getting in, and I want the risk of death, right? And like in D&D, it's actually kind of hard to fully die in D&D, but you can, and you definitely can be limping along quite injured, and your character can in fact completely die. And so that was not on the table for this. This was meant to be more fun, storytelling, kind of lighthearted sort of a thing. And so because of that led me to pull, and you could, I guess, pull from this either way, but I pull from lots of different resources. My first resource, and you'll know when you listen to it, obviously you hear I put a lot of little Easter eggs and references, many of which were simply to be comedic and to make it a little bit more fun. The first one is one of the funnest, most laid back stories, which is Dante's Inferno. The first thing I did was starting to read up on the different circles of hell in Dante's Inferno, which is a pretty, heavy kind of a thing, basically. But I got through, I think there was like, I don't have it right in front of me, but however many there are, 9 or 10 or whatever. Now, with this being a limited campaign that's a one shot, we were not going to go through every Dante's circle of hell. We're just not going to have time for that. And that would get kind of bogged down. If you are going to do a long campaign like that, you really need to do it in multiple sittings. When we do our D&D campaign, and those of you who do these kind of things, with the social skills group, it's an ongoing campaign where people are still the same characters going through an ongoing long adventure that doesn't necessarily have to have it. It doesn't even have to have an end, whereas a one shot does have an end. So anyway, so I put in some references there with Dante's Inferno. You'll notice that when basically there's a limbo circle of hell where everybody's just kind of like has no passion, has no interest, has no anything. And I threw that in and thought, going to a dull barbecue in a suburban neighborhood, that there could be this element of that, this mind numbing boringness that as they're going in, obviously, and Leslie in the gameplay picked up on this pretty quick, is that you had an invitation in your hand as a player. You go in and you're handing your invitation to your host, and it says on there, I hope in big huge letters is there, and the first thing the host does is he throws them all in a trash can as you walk in and says, let me just abandon all these right here. So abandon hope all ye who enter here, obviously, is a Dante's reference as well. But going from there, I also pulled several different things, that there's a level of hell that's dedicated to people who are violent, and that there was some things. Where was that? I think that was the one that had trees, and I used that to bring in some of those things as well. Obviously, that's a Wizard of Oz reference, so you can see that too. I will say the host of the barbecue, I decided to name him Max Demonlin, which of course is a reference to the devil and Max Devlin, as you remember, the 1971 classic with Elliot Gould, and someone else was in it too that I don't want to get into. Speaking of the devil, he played the devil anyway. Maybe you know what I'm talking about, but we don't want to get into that person. So, I was drawing from that. There was also, in the end, we have the hockey game that takes place on basically the frozen lake of hell, and the large frozen demon that, by the way, I only refer to as the boss. We didn't really get into calling him Satan or anything like that, who is frozen there as well. So there are a lot of little Dante things sprinkled in there. Obviously, use the Wizard of Oz, as well. Use the devil and Max Devlin. A couple others I ended up using, like I say, Wizard of Oz. Star Trek. There was actually a Star Trek thing that was in there, and this goes to, as you're writing and as you do the gameplay, you're wanting to be kind of flexible. I had a Star Wars. There was something in the long hallway that they were going through where there was actually a transporter device that tied in with it. It tied in with Hell somehow. It doesn't. There was some some kind of jokes that had to do with the salt vampire from the original Star Trek series, that was because you would get turned into salt when you're in this hallway. And anyway, there's a whole thing with opposite day and stuff that was meant to be a gag that it just didn't happen because they didn't search for that, and they solved that puzzle a different way. So as I was planning these, with every obstacle, I put down the things that were in their way, and I wrote down a few things for me that I was like, okay, here's some ways they could defeat this and could solve this challenge. And then I try to keep it open to, if they thought of something better, great. But if they discovered the tools or clues, then that would help. And when you are doing the game, I found in order to be concise and to try to move through everything in the time allotted, as the GM, you might have to give a little bit of a clue. And this one, I don't think I really ever had to do that. But if they may ask for a clue, or you just might have something to kind of prod them along a little bit if it comes up. You know, a great example of that is the D&D movie that came out a year or two ago, or maybe 3, but with Chris Pine and various other people, where they actually have a scene in there where one of the characters accidentally sets off a trap, which destroys a bridge that is the only possible way to get to their next little chapter, the next thing they have to do for the story to go on. They then discover accidentally that they have essentially a portal gun. It's a magic wand to where they can teleport. This is something that when it came out, I wasn't as familiar with some of this. My son in the theater just died laughing at that. And he explained to me that was a joke off of being a DM, because occasionally the people do not do, or they might say, you'll tell them, oh, here's all this elaborate stuff that you need to do to cross this bridge safely. And one of them's like, whatever, I just run onto the bridge. And it's like, well, they just destroyed that plot point. So now I need to throw something in to help them get to the next one, or else what? Do we just end it and it's not much fun? Now you'll also notice the joke continued that's built in for people who know that dynamic is that they then used that for every monumental plot point. From then on, they used the magical portal gun, which is apparently something, and it is something you watch out for too. If you give them something really powerful, they're going to use it. So those are some things in the gameplay that are important. Well, I thought it'd be fun to throw in a couple other things in the long, hot, windy hallway. I had references to the Bible, to Sodom and Gomorrah. Don't turn back; you'll turn into a pillar of salt. Which also tied in with Orpheus and Eurydice, kind of Hades town fame, as well as Greek mythology fame as well. Don't look back. In that case, I did make it recoverable as well, obviously, because there's no death in this game. Obviously, Lord of the Rings reference as well, because they activated an Ent to kill off oh, hey, I guess somebody died, which is the living trees. So yeah, several other. I mean, there were a lot of different references that were in there. Obviously, a reference to The Office, as well, was they had to face the demons that were all the staff of The Office, the cast of The Office. And for those of you that are into little deep dives into media, there was a Better Off Ted reference, of course, because Carl Gordon Jacobs was from an episode of that wonderful, maybe even before its time, 2-season comedy Better Off Ted, where there was a joke about an executive who died during a project, and the company tried to convince everyone that if the project was not finished on time, his soul would go to hell. And so I thought that would be a lot of fun as well. When you get into it, let's see. Yeah, as I was saying, building in these possible escapes and possible ways to overcome the challenges, I had already decided, for example, that the big boss, if you defrosted him, would be fair-minded and say, you don't belong here, I'm going to let you out. So that's an example of something that I had already decided beforehand. And I think I did give some little clues to that as it was going on. But it's something that was very risky for the players to do, because you're unleashing this big, huge demon. You don't know for sure what he's going to do. So, just a couple of different ideas for you as I'm putting this out there. I hope that this is interesting. If it isn't, I'm sure you've stopped watching by now. But for those of you that are persevering, then I hope this helps you to have that kind of decision as well. When I was planning, I'll show you my I came up with a little journal. I like to longhand write things. And so basically this is just a little notebook, and I put all these little tabbies, and this is now actually what I'm writing to what I'm using to write up the rules and make the little PDF that you're going to see. Here's, I have the section on the frozen lake and the things that it's based on, and Dante's, and what I want to have it be, and all that. And just a preview, I am going to be doing one of these for next month in September. You'll hear the real life play that we're going to do in a couple weeks here for Cage Fight, which is a game based off of trivia about the oeuvre of Nicolas Cage and his work in film. So it rewards. I have a couple of movie podcasters who are coming on to play as characters that can assume the powers of a Nicolas Cage character and use that in furthering their adventure. So that is the next one that you're gonna hear coming up. And then I got permission from the creator of Honey Heist to do a Honey Heist sequel and develop that a little bit. If any of you are familiar with One Shot RPGs, you probably heard that. The McElroy brothers on My Brother and Me played it once for an event, and it kind of got well-known notoriety then as well. So anyway, there's a lot of these different things you're going to hear me nerd out on when we do this. I promise it's not going to take over the whole podcast, but every month or two, I'd like to put something out there. And so every time I do, I'll make a little making of special where I'll walk you through my thought processes of telling the story and setting it up. So I hope everybody has a wonderful day and that you enjoy this little video. I'm going to put the plug that I've been putting for everything. August 29th, Thursday, go to dwighthurst.com/live. Check it out. You can watch the 3rd annual live stream for opioid overdose awareness, and you can also click and join. I've been saying this, so I hope you'll join, or at least watch during and or after. All righty, that's all we got. Thanks, everybody. Bye.